Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to read an excerpt of spoiler alert. This one is already out. It came out in October 2020, and this is an art. Thank you for reading a book, for sending me, or HarperCollins, because that's who sent me this book. And let me read the back of it. As Olivia Dade burst into the scene in this delightful, fun, romantic comedy set in a world of fan fiction in which a devoted fan goes on an unexpected date with her celebrity crush, who's secretly posting fan fiction of his own. Marcus Castro-Run has a secret, while the world knows him as Angus, the star of the biggest show on television, God of the Gates. He's known to fanfiction readers as Book Angus Would Never. An anonymous and popular poster, Marcus is able to get out his own frustrations with his character through his stories, especially the ones that features the internet's favorite couple to ship, Angus and Lavina. So hard name. But if anyone has ever found out about his online persona, he'd be fired immediately. April Whittaker has secrets of her own. A hardcore Lavina fan, she's hidden her fanfic and cosplay hobby in real life for years, but not anymore. When she decides to post her latest Lavina creation on Twitter, her photo goes viral. Trolls and supporters alike are commenting on a plus-size take. But when Marcus, one half of her OTP, sees her pic and asks her out on a date in spite of her crisis, she realizes life is really stranger than fiction. Even though their first date is a disaster, Marcus quickly realizes that he wants much more fun, much more from April than a once-time publicity stunt. And when he discovers she's actually unapologetic Levine Stan, his closest fandom friend, he has one more huge secret to hide from her. With love and Marcus' career on the line, can these two stop hiding for once and for all? Or will a match moving fandom end up prematurely shattered? So let me read the first. I don't know if it's the first chapter of prologue. When you look, it is chapter 1. Chapter 1. Between takes, Marcus did his best not to acknowledge the obvious. This was a stupid-ass way to die. Still, at the director's call to action, he let out a guttural howl and rode amid the chaos of warfare once more. Adrenaline metallic on his tongue as he galloped through a choking smoke machine. Let me turn this down a little bit more. Trying to do my reading here. Okay. Still, at the director's call of action, he let out a guttural howl and rode among the chaos of warfare once more. Adrenaline metallic on his tongue as he galloped through choking smoke machine clouds. Bellowing stunt performers on horseback whizzed past, while his own horse jawed rhythmically between his thighs, mud or some foul combination of mud and horse shit from the smell of it splattered against his cheek. The special rig raced ahead of him with the camera on the SUV's rushing arm, capturing all his determination and desperation. He didn't love the season's script. true, but he loved this. The physicality of it all. The way they showed big budgets brought those enormous smoke machines wired, the spider camera tracking overhead, hired those stunt actors, and paid for his training on horseback. That money was reserved acres and acres of Spanish coastline for the sole purpose of the series' finale climatic battle, and it allowed them to rehearse and film for weeks and weeks. Okay. Yeah, okay. And endless, miserable weeks to get just right the right shots, and it was miserable often. But because the behind-the-scenes crews of almost 1,000 consumable professionals have set the scene so thoroughly, so convincingly, he didn't have to pretend quite so hard. Didn't have to fight to lose himself in the moment. The hazy, chaotic landscape around him helped him drop into character, even as the literal and metaphorical choreography of a successful show in this particular scene came to his hand like a well-trained hound. There was no cut when Dido Cara, his talented college dean of more than 7 years now, ever since the pre-production for the series began, appeared through the fog as exactly the place they rehearsed, sword aimed directly at him. The showrunners had sacrificed long, continuous takes never possible for this battle scene. I have come for my revenge, and yes, the betrayer, Dido shouted, her voice raw and crackled with rage. Real-life exhaustion, too, he imagined. At a safe distance, he brought the horse to a standstill and swung down, strode up to her, and knocked aside her sword in a swift motion and gripped her shoulder. I have come for you, my beloved, he kept her face with one dirty hand. As soon as I heard you lived once more, not even the return of the dead from Tartus could stop me. I care nothing for anyone or anything else. Let the world burn. I want you, you alone, and I would defy the gods to have you. Those lines in the script contradicted seasons worth of character development, not to mention the books have inspired the series. He wouldn't dwell on that. Not now. For a moment, Kara softened against his chest, leaned into his palm. At this point in the long filming day, she sang. So did he. So did everyone else. So did the entire horseshit Thrones field. Mud had burrowed into places he didn't care to consider, betraying misery and perseverance against the odds weren't much of a stretch. Dido shoved him away. You are a demigod, she reminded him, married to another, and an adulterer besides. You lay with my sister, and she fell on her sword in disgrace. As such a betrayal upon word of my return from Hades. I can only hope she rises today. She too rises today, and takes her own revenge. It's a shame, so easy for him to muster, bowed his head. I thought you lost forever. Lavina may be my wife and maid, but she has no hold on my heart. And Anna, his brow furrowed, and plead for understanding despite his seeming betrayals. She was a tarnished mirror of you, nothing more. The thought appeared unbidden, unapologetic. Ravang Stan is going to fucking detonate when she sees this scene. You've betrayed mortals, and now you've betrayed the gods as well. Piteous demon indeed. With a swift, crouching wipe, Dido reclaimed her sword. I'll have my own revenge first. Hold on, I got a sword. Hold on. She claimed her sword. Hold on. I'll have my own revenge first. All the others will have to settle for your tournament in the afterlife. Her grip was sure and steady on the weapon, and she brandished it easily, despite a heavy bronze handle. The sword blade was blunt, lightweight aluminum for the safety of everyone involved, exactly like his. Still, the impact of metal against metal rang out as they began the dance that they had learned for weeks now. His moments flowed without much thought, the product of endless planning and repetition. The fight coordinator and choreographer had carefully planned each motion to emphasize the one-sidedness of the battle. Dido was trying to hurt him, but he was attempting to disarm her and avoid wounding her in the process. After driving him back with a sudden violent surge, she rapped, "No man will defeat me!" Oh, I love this. This is so great. More horses galloped past, partially obscured by the smoke. Escapees from the underworld bit and kicked and swung, and aimed discarded weapons at their mortals and immortal foes, who were attempting to dive back to Tartarus. Groans and death and shouts surrounded their own fight. Precise footwork back towards detail, precise. Block or wild swing. That may be true. He offered a smile, sharp and predatory. But as you just remind us both, I am more than a man. A clumsy callback to the famous line in both the second Gods of the Gate book and the second season of the series, when Dito had murmured in his arms that no man could seduce her. I'm more than a man, he returned, and then they paused filming to incorporate Kara's body double for the rest of the scene. More swings of the sword, some connecting, some not, most not. And then the fatal moment came. He fenced off her last impassionate attack, in adversary shoving her into the green-tipped rubble sword of one of his own men. The VFX department would fix the sword and blood later. An audience would see a fatal wound where only muddy silk existed now. Tears, final whispered words. As he knelt in the field, she died in his arms. When she was gone, he took one last red-eyed look at the battle all around her, saw that the forces of Tyrannus were losing, and his men no longer had need of him. Then he gently laid her on the ground beside her own sword, a cherished gift from Dido, from the time when Carthage strode into the chaos and allowed himself to be fatally stabbed by one of the dead. In the Elysian field, I'll see you once more, my brother. He finally murdered his final death. This is so good. It's like a Hercules or something, like a god play. I love that. Anything mythology, I love. So this is so awesome. For that extended stretch of time, Marcus was gone. Only Atticus, disoriented and desolate and dying and hopeful, existed. Cut! The director called. The order echoed by another crew members. I think we got everything we needed this time. That's a wrap for the scene. As the director and producer and manager turned away to discuss something, Marcus surfaced, blinking back to himself. His head floated above his shoulders, buoyant and uncluttered, as if as it sometimes did after he truly slipped of his own skin and lost himself in a character. Bliss, in his own way. For so long, the sensation he lived and labored for day by day wasn't enough, not anymore. Tara recovered more quickly than he did, levering herself up out of the mud into her feet. She heaved with a heartfelt sigh. Thank fucking Christ. She held out her hand to him. If I wanted mud in my ass crack, I'd pay for one of those full-body detox treatments, and that motherfucker would smell like tea tree or lavender, not horse shit. Horse shit. Well, that's horrible, because I've smelled horse shit, or horse poop. He laughed and allowed her to steady him as he stood. His leather armor seemed to weigh as much as what was stoat's skin, so that's not very heavy. The fair-skinned horsemaster was now leading away. If it's any consolation, you have a healthy, just been stabbed glove. Goddamn shine. They did all the close-ups and earlier takes then. After sniffling her armpits, she wrinkled her tight nose and gave a resigned sharp shit. I need a shower, pronto. At least we're done for the day. Tara gently didn't repose much response. He simply nodded. Just one more scene for me, he continued. Back at the studio later this week. My sword training montage. How about you? He sounded out the words in his head, checking for false scissors teeth. Somehow they were true. No, this is it. They filmed my immortality scene before the Battle of the Living. This scene would be his own last memory of filming Gods of the Gates. But for the television audience, Ahida's ascension to full god status would be their final glimpse of the character. Ambrosia, a nectar, and a healthy swallow in the river of youth, rather than blood and filth and despair. After said swallow, Agnes would forget Dido and Levita both. Poor Anna too. And after the final season aired, fans would go to slaughter R.J. and Ron, the series head writer, executive producers, and showrunners online and at Con. For multiple reasons, since the abrupt reversal of Idria's character arc was only one of the main storytelling failures in the last episode. Marcus couldn't even estimate the number of pointed, aggravated fix-it fix what would appear after the finale. Hundreds, definitely, maybe thousands. He'd be writing at least one or two of them as book Angus would never, with unapologetic Ravina Stanhope. Squinting through the residual smoke, he eyed the sword on the ground, bit a torn costume, a plastic water bottle hopelessly hidden from the camera's view, behind a diamond dressed as a dead member of Agnes' fleet. Should he take something from the set as a memento? Did he even want to? And what on this filthy field could both encompass more than 70 years working on the show and smell acceptable enough to display in the town? Nothing. So after a final heartfelt hug for Kara, he headed empty-handed towards his trailer, only to be stopped by a palm clapped onto his shoulder before he'd gone a dozen steps. Hold on, Marcus, no too familiar voice ordered. When Marcus turned around, Ron beckoned several cameras closer, as they were rolling somehow, and called back Kara to all the nearby crew. Shit. In his exhaustion, Marcus had forgotten this little ceremony, in theory a tribute to each main series actor at the end of their last day on set. In reality, a behind-the-scenes extra to tempt their audience to buy physical copies of the show, or at least pay more to stream the special content. Ron's hand was still on his shoulder. Marcus didn't shrug it off. But he tipped his face towards the ground for a moment, gathered his thoughts, and braced himself. Before he could leave, he had another role to play, one he had been performing for most of the decade, and one he wanted to leave behind with a greater fervency as each of those years ticked past. Marcus Can Rump. Friendly, vain, dim as that smoky battlefield surrounded him. He was a well-groomed golden retriever, proud of the few tricks he miraculously learned. When we began looking for our Angus, we knew we had to find an athletic actor, someone who could portray a leader of men and a lover of women. And above all else, Ron lifted a hand and pinched Marcus' cheek, lingering enough that he might have felt the flesh of sudden rage. A pretty face. We couldn't have found prettier, if not we'd searched for another decade to prove us. Marcus' stomach churned. Another pinch, and he forced himself to grin smugly, to toss his hair and shield his armor so that he could show the unseen audience the flex of his biceps, even as he moved out of Ron's reach. Then the showrunner and the crew were urging Marcus to say something, to make a speech in honor of all his years on this series, impromptu speaking. Would this fucking day never fucking end? The wall, though, surrounded him like an embrace, familiar, comforting, if increasingly claustrophobic. In its confines, he knew what to do, what to say, who to be. 5 years ago, he turned around. Wait, how many years have we been filming now? The boss chuckled indulgently. 7. 7 years ago. Then, Marcus gave an embarrassed shrug, beaming towards the camera. 7 years ago, we started filming it, and I had no idea what was in store for all of us. I'm very grateful for this role and for our audience, since you need it. He made himself say, a pretty face. I'm glad mine was the prettiest you saw. Not surprised, but glad. He arched an eyebrow, settling his fists on his hips in a heroic pose, and waited for more laughter, this time directed and deliberately elicited by him. That bit of control settled his stomach only a little. I'm glad you found so many other pretty faces stacked alongside. He winked at Kara. Not as pretty as mine, of course, but pretty enough. More smiles from the crew and an eye roll from Kara. He could leave now. He knew it. This was all anyone outside his closest collegians and crew members expected of him. Still, he had to say one last thing, because this was the last day. This was the end of the 7 damn years of his life.
I want to do that activity.
Okay. Years of endless hard work and challenges, and accomplishment. Yeah. Accomplishment.
I mean, napkin.
Yeah.
And I need your scissors for that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I do that one right now.
We can do that later. Right now I'm filming. So.
Can I do the turkey?
Yeah. And accomplishments and the joy that came from doing that work.
Hey,
meeting those challenges, and finally allowing himself to count these accomplishments as worthwhile in his. Huh? Yeah, the remote's kind of dead. You just gotta wait. It's gonna be a couple pages, okay? Give me a couple pages, please, and then I'll go over there. He could now ride like a horse, like he's been doing his whole life. The swordmaster said he was the best in the case with a weapon in hand, and had the fastest feet of any actor she ever met. At long last, he'd learned to pronounce Latin with the ease his parents had both acknowledged and deemed a bit irony. Over his time on Gods of the Gate, he'd been nominated for 5 major acting awards. He's never won, of course, but he had to believe, he did believe, that the nominations didn't simply reward pretty face, but also acknowledged skill, emotional depth. The public might believe him an actor, acting saving, able to ape intelligence despite having none of his own. But he knew that the work he put into his craft and his career, none of that would have been possible without the crew. He angled away from the cameras to look at some of those people and to observe the change in his expression. Finally, I want to thank everyone behind the scenes of our show. There are nearly thousands you and I can't. The sincere words tangled his tongue, and he paused for a moment. I can't imagine how any series could have found a more dedicated, knowledgeable group. So, to all the producers, stunt performers, location managers, dialect coaches, production designers, costume designers, hair and makeup artists, VFX and SFX people, and so many others. Thank you. I owe you more than I can expect. There, it was done. He managed to say it without stumbling too much. Later, he'll breathe and consider his next step. Now he simply needed to wash and rest. After a final round of embarrassing applause and a few slaps on the back, and hugs and handshakes, he made his escape to his trailer for a quick wash at the sink, and then to his generic Spanish hotel room, where a very, very long and well-deserved shower awaited him. At least he thought he made his escape, until Vika and Rick caught up with him just outside the hotel lobby and Marcus, do you have a minute? Her voice somehow remained steady, even though she was jogging over from the parking lot at sensible heels. I have a few questions about the big sequence you're filming now. He wasn't entirely surprised to spot her. Once or twice a year, she'd show up whenever they were shooting and get whatever on-site impressions and interviews she could. And those articles were always especially popular on her blog, where she'll want to cover the end of the series filming in person. Unlike some other reporters, she respected his privacy if he asked for space. He even liked her. That wasn't the problem. The other qualities that made her his favorite entertainment blogger / paparazzo also made her his least favorite. She was friendly, funny, easy to relax around, too easy. She was also smart enough to have spied something off about him. Offering her wide smile, he stopped inches short of freedom. Because you know I can't tell you anything about what's happening this season. But if you think the readers want to see me covered in mud, and we both know they do, then feel free to take a picture or two. He posed, presenting her with what he'd been told was his best side, and she got a couple of shots. I know you can't tell me anything specific, she said, checking the images. But maybe you could just describe the sixth season in 3 words. Tapping his chin, he teared his brow. Play acted deep thoughts for longing. I know! He brightened and turned a pleasant grin on her. Last one ever. I hope that. Her eyes narrowed and she studied him for a beat too long. Then, confronted with the gleaming gleams of her own innocent smile, he had to blink. I guess, she trailed off smiling, I guess I need to find one of the other actors to ask about how the show's ending that deviates from both E. Ralph Wade's books and, of course, Homer's Audrey. Andreas ended up marrying Dido in both of these stories. But the show might have taken a different approach. Oh no. What the fuck? And Dido was long dead by the end of Anita. By the final page of the third God of the Gates book, she was alive, but decided no longer interested in this. Although he supposed that could change if Wade ever released the last 2 books in the series. Somewhere, Virgo was probably uttering Latin curses as he shifted in his grave, and by all rights, E. Wade should be side-eyeing Rika from her lavish compost in Hawaii. He pinched his forehead with the thumb and forefinger absently, noting the dirt beneath his nails. Damn it, someone needed to correct such grievous misapprehension. The Argene wasn't Vika's brows rose with his first words and her phone was recording. And he saw the trick.
Mommy,
Oh yes, he saw it. What?
Mommy, you need to buy that to know where the gem. So now when he shined it here, he saw some gems. So white is gems and purple is not gems. And when he flashed it over here, he saw your white.
Oh, okay. Alright.
So always remember to wash all the way to your wrist.
Okay, yeah. The Argene isn't something I've read, sadly. I'm sure Homer is very talented, but I'm not much of a reader in general. The last bit, at least, had been true before he discovered fanfic and audiobooks. He hadn't read much besides his scripts, and he labored over those until he learned them well enough to record them, loop the recording, and play the words back to himself over and over. She tapped her screen and her own recording ended. Thank you, Marcus. It was very kind of you to talk to me. My pleasure, Vika. Good luck with your other interviews. With a final flash of a vapor smile, he was finally inside the hotel and treading towards the elevator. After pressing the buttons for his floor, he leaned heavily against the wall and closed his eyes. Soon he was going to have to grapple with his persona, where it chafed, how it had served him in the past, and how it served him still. Whether shredding it would be worth the consequences to your personal life and career. But not today. Fuck, he was tired. Back in his hotel room, the shower felt just as good as he hoped. Better. Afterwards, he powdered on his laptop and ignored the scripts sent by his agent, choosing his next project, one that would hopefully take his career into a new direction. Could wait too, could checking his Twitter and Instagram accounts. The only thing that definitely needed to happen before he slept for a million years, sending a direct message to unapologetic Lavina Stan, or Useley, as he's been calling her, to her complete disgust. Useley is a good name for a cow. Only for a cow. She's ridden. She hadn't told him to stop, and he hadn't. The nickname, one he used alone, pleased him more than it should. He logged onto the Lavina server he helped create several years ago, the use of the lively, talented, ever-supported artist Lavina fanfic community. On A03, he still occasionally dabbled in Arena Ditto fanfic, but less and less often these days, especially once Useley had become the primary beta and proofreader for all book Arenas would never stories. She lived in California, and she'd still be at work. She wouldn't be able to respond immediately to his messages if he didn't DM her tonight. Though he wouldn't have her response first thing in the morning, and he needed that. More and more as each week passed. Soon, so very soon, he and Useley would be back in the same time zone, the same state. Not that it approximately mattered, since they never met in person. Only it did matter. Somehow, it did. So, Gods of the Gates, Book 1, EWAB, the literary tour de France that inspired a world-famous TV series. Ebook, $8.99. Paperback, $10.99. Hardcover, $19.99. Audio, $25.99. When gods play a war, humanity loses. Juno had watched Jupiter dally with mortal women too many times through the centuries. When she leaves him in a furious righteousness fury, his own godly temper takes hold. Heedless of the consequences, he hews thunderbolts so mighty that the underworld itself cracks open, and fissures reaching all the way down to Tartarus, home of the wicked dead. Free from eternal punishment, they would return to Earth, challenge Jupiter for power, and doom humanity. To preserve his cruel rule, to save the mortals, he begs, but does not respect. Jupiter follows his fellow gods with guarding the new gates to the underworld he created in his reckless rage. But the immortals, as always, care more for their eternal feet than do. If humanity is to be saved, demigods and mortals will have to guard the gates too. Unfortunately then, that Juno has her own reasons for wanting Tartarus unguarded. Humanity be damned. And that is the first chapter of Spoiler Alert. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to, thumbs up, and comment down below. And thank you for HarperCollins or Albion and Books for sending me to do a review. And ta-ta for now. I'll talk to you again in another video. Bye-bye!